Hello and welcome to this video in which I will be doing a code walkthrough of the basic CPU scheduler program that I wrote yesterday. This code is written in C and it is going to show you how FCFS, shortest job first, priority and round robin schedulers work in operating systems. So let's begin. In the beginning you will see a few include files. These are very common include files. Then we have some constants that we have defined here. And what they do is clearly written over here and you can actually know what they do from their name. So let's go all the way to the main function, which is the orchestrator of the entire program. So in the main function, I have an array of pointers to structures, right? So in the beginning, there is a structure over here, which is just called pinfo, and that has a few variables that store information about processes like the process order, the arrival time, so on and so forth. So we need to have an array that will store the information about one or more than one processes that we are going to work on. That is the reason I have an array that has pointers to structures, right? So because it's an array, that is one level of indirection here, that is the one star here for, and the other star is there because the array does not contain the structures itself, rather the array contains pointers to those structures. That is why we have a double pointer over here, and that has been initialized to null. Then the pinfo's len variable has the length of this array. Time is basically the global time at this point of time, and that is going to basically get incremented after a process gets executed for one quantum of time. Next process holds the next process to be executed, and I have initialized that to no process at this point of time. The algorithm has the algorithm that is being used for this instance of the program that is running. Preemptive tells us if preemption has been turned on for this algorithm or not. Context switches counts the number of context switches that happen during the execution of this program. Previous process tracks the previous process that was running, and quantum is used to store the time quantum for the round robin algorithm. Now let's talk about how we are going to take input from the user. So we have a function called take input, into which we are passing on the addresses of all the variables we want to get modified by this function. So in C, as you must know, that if you want a function to modify something that you have, you need to pass the addresses of those variables. Pay special attention to this variable over here. This is already a double pointer, and since you're passing an address of this, the signature of take input is going to have 3 asterisks over there. So let's go inside take input and see how that is working. So as I said, we have pinfo, that is the address of the array that has pointers to structures, right? That is why there are 3 stars over here. We have the address of the pinfo's length, into which we will be putting the number of processes that we have, that the user will provide to us. Then we will give the algorithm that the user has chosen, right? Then we will say if the algorithm is running in the preemptive mode or not. And if the round robin algorithm has been selected, we'll also give the quantum for that algorithm, right? So we have initialized a few variables to store information from the user. Then we ask the user about the algorithm, and depending on which algorithm has been used, we set the algorithm variable to the constant that we have defined at the top of the file. If the user has selected the shortest job first or the priority scheduling algorithms, we know that they support preemption. So we also ask the user, is it going to be preemptive? And we also store that. Then if the algorithm is the round robin algorithm, then we also enter the time quantum, and then we try to get the number of processes from the user. And once we have the number of processes, we allocate the array that is going to store the pointers to the structures that will store information about these processes. And let me quickly show you how is that going to happen. So we have a function here called allocate memory for process list, and that takes the number of processes. And what is that going to return to us? It is going to return to us an array that has pointers to structures. So let's see how that works. So let's go to that function. As you can see, it takes the length, that is the number of processes that the user has entered, and it is returning a double pointer. What does that mean? It means that we are returning an array that has pointers to structures. So one star is for that being an array, and the other star is for it containing pointers to structures rather than structures themselves, right? So the array that is going to have the pointers is going to be a double pointer, and its length is just going to be length, and since it is just going to contain pointers to pinfo, we have just done a memory allocation of the size of a pointer variable to pinfo multiplied by the length, and then we have run a loop, and we need to allocate memory for each structure that is going to go into the array. As in, the structure will not get into the array, the address of the structure, as in the pointer to the structure, is going to get into that array, right? So if you see inside the loop, I am allocating some memory, that is the size of a structure. It is getting cast to a pinfo pointer, and that pointer is getting into the array, right? So the structure is not getting into the array, rather the pointer to the structure is getting into the array, and then we are returning the array that has pointers to these structures. So now we are back in take input. So now we run a loop over the number of processes. We initialize a few things about the processes to their default variables, right? So here we are using the arrow notation because pinfos is an array that has pointers to structures. So pinfos I is going to have the ith pointer to the ith structure, right? So since this is a pointer, and whenever you have a pointer to a structure, you use this notation to get the members of the structure. So we are setting, most of the things to 0, but the process number is getting set to I. So you might wonder, if we already have the I as the index in the array, why is there a need to store the process number also? And I will try to explain this to you when we do the round robin scheduling. And in that algorithm, we will try to sort the array, basically a copy of this array, by order of arrival, so that it becomes easy for us to figure out the next process to run in a round robin fashion. And that is why in order to link the process that we select from the sorted array back to the original process number, we need to store the process number also. So if the algorithm is a priority scheduler, then we try to get the priority of the processes. Lower numbers mean higher priorities, as we already know from our theory lectures. If the algorithm is a first come first served or a round robin scheduler, then we try to enter the order of arrival also. We will get the time of arrival for all the algorithms, right? And we will also get the burst time of each process for all the algorithms and store it in the respective places. If the algorithm is a round robin algorithm, then we will try to initialize the time slice left for each process to quantum. And in the end, we will set the value of pinfos out. Now pinfos out was a triple pointer, so the value of that is going to be a double pointer, which we initialized at the top. And you know that double pointer is an array to pointers to structures, and that is pinfos. And after that, we just print a new line so that when we try to display the output, there is a gap in between. So now we are back in main, and we have already studied how the input is going to be accepted from the user. Now we just run a loop here, and it says while not all processes have finished their execution, and we give the pinfos array of pointers to structures, and we give it the length also. And this is a very straightforward function in the code attached to this video, which is the code basically available on my GitHub account. you should be able to figure out how this function works, right? So till all the processes have not finished execution, you keep running this loop and you set the previous process to the next process, okay? And the next process is going to be the next process to run, right? In which you pass on the next process, p-enforce length, algorithm, preemptive, time, quantum, and the address of context switches, right? So you might ask, why have we kept a backup of the next process? It's because to compare if the next process is going to be different from the previous process, and in that case we are going to know that a context switch has happened. That is why we keep a copy of the next process. And in this function you could also pass the previous process or the next process, does not make any difference. So the next process to run needs to know what was the last process that was running, right? So for the first iteration of the loop, we will set next process to no process, and that is going to get passed on to the next process to run function, and then the ball is going to get rolling depending on the algorithms, right? So here you might as well write previous process because it's just the same thing as the next process, and we have kept a backup of that to compare if the next process that is going to come out of the result of running this function is going to be different from this process, and in that case we are going to print some messages about context switches. We will look at the functioning of this function, which is basically the main part of this program, later, but let's look at how the rest of the main function is working. So whatever process has come out, if that process is a no process and the previous process was not a no process and the algorithm is not round robin. For round robin, we calculate the context switches differently, and that is why we also pass the address of context switches to the next process to run. So the way we calculate context switches here in the main function excludes the round robin scheduler. Please keep that in mind. So if the next process is no process, that is there is no process available to be run, and the previous process was not a no process, then we know that a context switch from a concrete process to a no process has happened, and we increase the number of context switches. Else, if the next process is not a no process, but the previous process was a no process, right? And the algorithm is not round robin again, then we say context switch from no process to a concrete process, and we still go and increment the number of context switches. The next process is not a no process, and the previous process is also not a no process, but the next process is not equal to the previous process, right? And the algorithm is not round robin. We say the context switch has happened from one process to another, and we increment the number of context switches, right? If the next process is a no process, we say from time to time plus one, right? No process, right? No process was running. Else we print from time to time plus one, we were running process P, next process, right? And then after this process has run, we run a function called run process and update structs, so that all the bookkeeping information about, incrementing the time, and if this process has run, we have to probably increase the response times, the waiting times of the rest of the processes. If a process has finished, then we might want to calculate the turnaround time, mark the process as finished, and do all such bookkeeping in run process and update structs, right? And when all the processes have finished executing, this while loop will be over, and then we will display the output, and then we will deallocate all the memory that has been allocated for storing the array and all the structures, right? The array has pointers to structures. Those structures are consuming memory, and the array that has those structures, that will be freed. And before freeing that, we will go and free up each of those individual structures also. Now let's take a look at how the bookkeeping function, that is run process and update structs, works. So we run this function once we have decided which process to run, right? If the process to run is not the no process, then we decrement how much time is left for the process to finish. Then we also mark that the process has run at least once, right? And once it has been set to 1, there is no harm in repeatedly setting it to 1, right? It is a sticky bit. If how much left to run for the process ever becomes less than equal to 0, then we say that the process has terminated, and the turnaround time for the process is the current time minus the process's arrival time plus 1. We say plus 1 because we have not yet incremented time, right? Time is going to be incremented here. So since the process is actually ending at the end of this time quantum, we just add a 1 to say that, okay, this is ending at the end of this time quantum. And we run a loop over all the processes, right? And if I is the process that was getting run in this time quantum, then we continue. We don't have to do any further bookkeeping for that process. But for the rest of the processes, if the process has already arrived and it has not run at least once, then we increment its response time. And if the process has already arrived and the process has not terminated, then we increment its waiting time. In the end, we increment time by 1. We saw some of the output in the main function, as in whenever a context switch happens, if it is not using the round robin scheduler, then we saw those context switches here. And we also saw the process timeline for all the algorithms here, right? From time this to time plus 1, if it's a no process, or if a concrete process was running, we put the process number over here. But the bookkeeping information about the response times, the waiting times, and the turnaround times are shown in the display output function, which we will take a look next. So in the display output function, we just print a blank line so that there is a space between the timeline and this output. We run a loop on all the processes, right? And we just print the response time for that, the ith process, the waiting time, and the turnaround time. And in the end, we print the number of context switches that have happened while executing all of these processes according to the given algorithm. Now, let's take a look at one of the main functions of this program, that is the next process to run function. That takes the previous process, as in the previous process is equal to the next process here. It takes the array of pointers to the structures that hold information about the processes, the length of that array, the algorithm that is being used, whether preemption is on, the current time, if round robin scheduling is being used, what is the time quantum, and if round robin scheduling is being used, we pass the address of the context switches, so that is passed on further to the function that handles round robin scheduling, and that handles the context switches for that algorithm. So let's look at this function. As you can see, this is pretty much a very trivial switch case, though it has nested switch cases inside. So we first switch by the algorithm. If it is using a first come first served algorithm, then the next process is going to be returned by this FCFS function. And if it is using the shortest job first scheduling algorithm, then we are going to look at whether preemption is being used or not. If there is no preemption, then we are going to run the SJF non-preempt function, and that is going to give us the next process to run, right? And if preemption is there, we are going to run the SJF preempt function to figure out which process is going to run for the next quantum of time, right? And for the default, we just return no process. If we use the priority scheduling, we have both the non-preemptive and the preemptive versions of that algorithm, and they are being addressed by two different functions. And if we use the round robin scheduler, we use the RR function, but we make sure we pass the context switches pointer so that it can change that. Keep in mind that the next process to run returns something which one of these functions return. And whatever is getting returned by this function is going to be the process that is going to run for the next one quantum of time. It is not going to run till it gets finished. Once it runs for one quantum of time, we are going to update the bookkeeping information, right, about increasing the response times and the turnaround times if something got over, or the waiting times. We're going to increase the time. We're going to check if context switches have happened, right? We will do all of that, and then we will again run next process to run to figure out which process is going to run in the next quantum of time. Now let's look at the FCFS function that is going to return us the next process to run, right, in the next time quantum if first come first served algorithm is being used for process scheduling in the program. So it takes the last process running, the array of pointers to all the structures that contain process information, and the length of that array, and the current time. So you can just read this like English, right? So if the process that was running has not finished, then you return the same process, because FCFS is non-preemptive by nature. So if a process is already running, then you return the same process, right? So let's go to the has processed finished function to see what it does. So if the process is a no process, right, then we are going to say it has finished executing, and then we are going to search for another process. But if the process is a concrete process, then we just try to look at its has terminated bit in its structure, and that is going to tell us if it has finished or not. So trying to say that again, if the last running process has not finished, then you keep running it. Otherwise you return the next unfinished but arrived process by order. That is, you figure out a process that has already arrived, but it has not yet finished, but it should have the minimum order, because in FCFS we go by order, right? So we go with the one that has the minimum order number, and then we go with the one that has the next bigger order number, so on and so forth. So this function is also very easy to understand, right? We are just trying to figure out the process that has got the minimum order number. So what do? So we run a loop over all the processes, right? And we do a current process equal to current process plus 1 percentage p infos length. This will just make sure that the current process stays between 0 and p infos len minus 1. If the process is available to run, now let's take a look at what that is. Now that says that the process has arrived and the process has not finished. And you can already see the process has arrived code over here and the process has finished code over here, and they are very, very simple. And the is process available to runs code just uses these two functions to figure out if a process is available to run at this point of time. So let's go back to the next unfinished arrived process by order function, right? So if the current process under consideration by this while loop, right, which basically the current process is tracking, is available to run, right? And if its process order is less than the minimum order, and the minimum order has been set to a very high number, right? And the number is basically 99999, right? So this is how you find minimums. You might know that from your DSA classes. So you set the min process to that process and the minimum order to that process's process order. And you do that over all the processes, and you return whatever the minimum order process that you found. And that is going to be returned by the FCFS function. So now that we have looked at the FCFS function, let's take a look at the SJF non-preempt function. Now this is very similar to FCFS because FCFS was also non-preemptive, and what SJF does is it first figures out if the last process has not yet finished running, and if that is the case, it still continues to run the last process. Otherwise it returns the next unfinished arrived process by shortest time remaining. The FCFS algorithm was trying to figure out a process that has arrived, it is not finished yet, but it selected a process going by the minimum order. But shortest job first is going to figure out a process which has the shortest time remaining. And you can go take a look at this function from the code in my GitHub repository and figure out how that works. It works pretty similar to the function that was used for FCFS. in SJF preempt, we have preemption on. That means that even if the last process is still running, there is no guarantee that it is going to run for the next time quantum. Another process can preempt this process because the process that is preempting the currently running process has a shorter time left. So we are not going to check if the current process has not yet finished running. We are directly going to call this function, and this function has a chance of returning a process that is different from the last running process, because it is anyway going to give us the process that has the minimum running time. And please keep in mind, this function is the same function as this function that is being used in the non-preemptive case. Now, priority scheduling is pretty much identical to how we do SJF non-preempt and SJF preempt. We have priority non-preempt and we have priority preempt. In priority non-preempt, we do the same thing. By now, you must have gotten the pattern here. If the last process has not yet finished executing, we return the last process running. Otherwise, we figure out the next unfinished but arrived process by priority. So in the SJF set of functions, we used to look at the minimum time remaining. For FCFS, we used to look at the minimum order, but here we'll be looking at the minimum priority. So this function is again pretty similar to these functions that I'm highlighting over here. And for the priority preempt function, we have no guarantee that the last running process is still going to be the process which has the highest priority, as in the lowest priority number. Since some other process might have come in the meantime, it is available to run and it has not yet finished executing. Of course, it might have come pretty recently. So this function might return a different process than the last running process. And also, you should again keep in mind that this function is the same function that you use in the non-preemptive case of priority scheduling. You can take a look at this function in the code that you can find from my GitHub repository. The link to the repository can be found in this video's description. Please continue to watch the rest of the video before you jump on to look at the code. Now it's finally time to look at the round robin function. It might look like a very big function, but it is actually one of the simplest functions in this piece of code. But you need to pay a little bit of attention to be able to understand what is happening here. So it takes the usual stuff. It also takes the time quantum, and it also takes the address to the context switches variable, because the way round robin handles context switches is very different from the way the rest of the algorithms handle context switches. First, we create a sorted p-infos array. It is a similar kind of array, like an array that has pointers to structures that store process information. We are going to create a similar kind of array using the same allocate memory for process list function and give it the same length. Then we are going to copy all the pointers stored in the p-infos array into the sorted infos array. Keep in mind that at this point of time, both the arrays point to the same set of structures. We are going to run the sort by order function on the sorted p-infos array, and we are going to pass on the length of the array. Let's take a look at what the sort by order function does. The sort by order function just uses the qsort library function. This is a C library function that does quick sort. You pass on the array as a void double pointer, and we pass a double pointer because p-infos is actually a pointer to a pointer. We pass on the length. We pass on the size of one element of this array. Now each element of this array is basically a pointer to a structure. So we pass on the size of a p-info pointer, and we give it the function pointer to an order comparator. What the order comparator is going to do, and its code is right here above, is it takes two entries in this array and then tries to figure out how they're supposed to be sorted depending on something inside those entries. The quicksort algorithm is going to make use of this order comparator to be able to figure out if there are two pointers in its array, how is it going to sort them in increasing order. And in this case, it is going to be the process order. So let's take a look at the order comparator here. So we are being passed two pointers. So we are not given the elements, rather we are given the pointers to those elements. And what are those elements themselves? Those elements are pointers to structures, right? So that means X is a pointer to a structure. That is why it is being cast as pinfo double pointer, right? Let me say that again. The way the quicksort comparator takes its arguments is it gives the comparator addresses of its elements. Now we know the elements of our array, which is the pinfos array that we have here, are basically addresses to structures, right? So now that we have an address of such an element, and that element has an address of a structure, we have to cast the X and the Y as pinfo double pointers, right? And its value is going to give us the pointer to the structure as we have written in the left over here. So now that we have the pointers to our structures, we can use the arrow notation to figure out the process orders, right? And we will return X order minus Y order, right? And this is enough to sort the array in an ascending order of process orders. Okay, now that we have our pointers to structures, right, sorted in a way such that the order numbers of those structures are in ascending order, right, and the pointers are stored in that order, right, in sorted pinfos, let's move on. If the last process running was not a no process, right, and if the last process running is still available to run, right, then we take one away from its time slice. The time slice has been initialized to quantum as we saw in the take input function. And we return the last process running because we still need to run it. In round robin, you keep running a process for its entire time slice. It may not run for its entire time slice if it gets over before that. That can happen if its burst time is not a multiple of the time quantum, right? That is why this check is important. Even if its time slice has not run out, the process might have finished executing, right? And we return the same process if its time slice is still left. If the time slice has gotten over, then we reset it to quantum again so that next time it runs, it gets its entire time slice of whatever quantum input parameter has been taken in the take input function. We increment context switches because even if we have to run the same process again, once its time slice runs out, that will count as one context switch. It might so happen that this process may not be selected again, because if there is another process available in round robin, we will be selecting that process and we will be looking at that later. But it can also happen that the same process might get selected in case no other process is available to run at this point of time. And we will print context switch after time slice has expired if we are running in the else of this if condition. That is, the time slice has run out. But we are not going to return anything. Keep in mind that before we return the last process running here, because it was still available to run and its time slice had not run out, we had to deallocate the process list, that is the sorted pinfos array. And why did we have to do that? That is to avoid memory leaks, because every time we enter the RR function, right, we are returning here. So sometime again we will enter the RR function. It is going to allocate that structure all over again, right, the array all over again. So we don't want to keep consuming memory unnecessarily. So we need to deallocate before we return. But why do we pass a 1 to this deallocation function. So let's take a look at this deallocation function real quick. So there are two structures here. One is the outer array that stores the pointers to the structures, and the rest are all the structures that store the process information. When we send only outer, that means that it is only going to free the outer array that stores the pointer structures. The actual structures are not going to be freed. It is because the original p-infos array still has pointers to the structures. If we free the structures, then we will lose all the process information stored in those structures. Our aim here is to only deallocate the sorted p-info array and not touch the structures it is pointing to. So what is happening in this else if? This is the else to this if. And this if was about if the process is still available to run, the last process running. But well, if the last process is not available to run anymore, right? And if its time slice has not gotten over, what does that mean? That means that a context switch has to happen because the process has finished execution, but time slice still left. Because the time slice is still left, but since it is the else of this if over here, and this if says that is process available to run, if the process is not available to run, the last running process, what is going on? The process has clearly already arrived. That means the process has already finished, right? So we print this and we don't return anything. What happens here in this chunk of code? Now we have two arrays over here. We have the sorted p-infos and we have the p-infos, right? So in an attempt to figure out the next unfinished arrived process by order for round robin, which is a function that we will see, which is a very, very simple function, we are going to pass on the sorted p-infos array, not the original p-infos array. And in order to make this work for this function, we cannot pass the last running process, because the last running process is basically an index into the original p-infos array, right? We have to figure out to what index inside the sorted p-info array does the last running process index map to. So we call that index into the sorted p-infos as the last process running in sorted p-infos. We run a loop, and if sorted p-infos I process number is equal to last process running, then that is our index inside the sorted p-infos array, and that is what we are going to pass on to this function, because this function is not going to take p-infos, it is rather going to take sorted p-infos, and this function is going to give us the next process to run, because either the last process was a no process or the last process has expired its time slice, or it has finished execution but its time slice is still left. It is just a minor detail, that's all. But we need to figure out the next process to run, right? So what does this function do? This is a very simple function. What this does is, it just does a current process equal to current process plus 1 percentage p-infos underscore length, so that it goes to the next process index inside the sorted p-infos. If the process is available to run, we just return it, because the sorted p-infos is already sorted by order number, so it is guaranteed to give us a process which is higher in order number, right? So we go from minimum order numbers towards bigger order numbers, and this check over here, is process available to run, is there because we need to ascertain that the process that we are selecting, it might have a higher order number, but it might not have arrived, or it might have gotten finished, right? We need to return a process which has already arrived but not yet finished. That is why we do this check, and we just return that process. If no such process is there, we return no process. So once we have the next process to run as a return value of the next unfinished arrived process by order for RR, as we just saw before, we need to check if the next process to run, that's the return value of this function, is a no process. It is totally possible that there is no process that is available to be run. In that case, before returning that no process, we need to deallocate the sorted p-infos array, as we always do anytime we return from this function. Else, we need to make sure that to return is actually an index into the original p-infos array. We passed the sorted p-infos array, and the last process running in sorted pinfos, which we got from this loop into this function. So naturally, the to return number that you get is an index into this array, not into the original pinfos array. Everything outside this function actually obeys the original pinfos array, which is not necessarily sorted by process order. So we need to just figure out the original process number, and this is the reason why we had to store the process number in the structures, as I was talking towards the beginning of the video. So I just go inside sorted pinfos, use the index into that, and figure out that process's original process number, and I overwrite to return with that. If the last process was a no process, but now there is a concrete process, because we are sure that it is not a no process because we are in the else of that, then we need to increase the context switches and print that a context switch transfer has happened from a no process to a concrete process, and we can return the process to be run, and this to return is an index into the original pinfos array, and we will do that after deallocating the memory for the sorted pinfos array, as we always do before returning anything from this function. That's all about the program. If you go through the program after having watched this video, and you can find the program on my GitHub repository, the link to the repository is given in the description of this video. You'll be able to understand what is exactly happening in this program, give lots of inputs to this program, and you will be able to figure out what is really happening in all of these algorithms. Before we end, I am going to show you some screenshots of outputs for different scenarios. Please don't leave without watching the examples, and if you like my work, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.